Matchmaking in MMA is a very delicate art form, and while getting it right every time is impossible, sometimes it's painfully clear that we're looking at a mismatch. As always, if you guys enjoy the video, please be sure to let us know by giving it a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Now, without further ado and ranked in no particular order, here are some of the worst matchmaking mistakes in MMA. Cain Velasquez vs. Francis Ngannou. In some alternate universe with slightly better matchmaking, we could well have seen Cain Velasquez make a triumphant return to the UFC's heavyweight division following a long battle with injuries. But no. For some reason, the promotion decided to match this absentee former champion up against the hardest puncher to ever lace up 4-ounce gloves, Francis Ngannou. Maybe the UFC thought that Cain's wrestling would prove to be kryptonite for Francis Ngannou, similar to the strategy that Stike Miocic implemented at UFC 220. But sadly, this old legend of the fight game was basically served up on a platter for the Predator. And when the opening bell rang, it took Ngannou less than a minute to get Cain out of there. And another unfortunate turn of events, Cain's knee appeared to give out underneath him as he absorbed a short but powerful uppercut from the future champion of his division, and he never made the walk to the octagon again. Penn vs. Rodriguez. This one is a prime example of an aging legend getting screwed over by the matchmakers. Penn did not need to be in the same cage as the rising talent Yair Rodriguez at that stage of his career. But despite loss after loss and a legacy that was on the verge of being somewhat tarnished, Dana and his team still decided to try and build Yair's name off of this former champion. And sure enough, Yair toyed with him for a round before finishing him off with a brutal TKO. Chris Munoz, a pointless matchup that didn't even seem to raise Rodriguez's stock much higher than it had already been. Bizarre matchmaking from the UFC brass. Sean O'Malley versus Chris Munoz. This is as bad of a matchup as you'll ever see. Although, in truth, this next one wasn't entirely the fault of the UFC. After his original opponent was forced to pull out, Sean O'Malley was left without a dance partner at the 11th hour. And with no options available within the UFC, the matchmakers turned to Chris Munoz, a regional-level fighter with an iron chin and an interesting hairstyle. Unfortunately, what happened next was a historical beatdown as the future bantamweight champion used Munoz as target practice, hammering him with shot after shot. Munoz's chin kept him in there, but the fight was eventually stopped in the third round in what was a pretty ugly and one-sided showcase. Petr Yan vs. Faber. Even before he rose up to take hold of the bantamweight title, most fans were well aware that Petr Yan was a dangerous force to be reckoned with. And for some reason, after Uriah Faber came out of retirement and pulled off a stunning of Ricky Simone, the UFC thought that immediately matching him up with Petr Yan would be a good idea. Well, it wasn't. Yan, as he does, grew into the contest more and more with each passing minute, eventually finding a home for a brutal head kick that pretty much sent Faber right back into retirement. This was a classic example of old vs. new, and Faber was just outgunned right from the get-go here. Johnny Hendrick vs. Paulo Costa. Some fights just look bad on paper, and this middleweight showdown between the rising Paulo Costa and the severely depleted Johnny Hendricks just seemed like a shameless attempt to feed an old star to a new one. Hendricks was indeed a great welterweight in his day, but by the time he reached the 185-pound division, he was a ghost of his former self. Unathletic, unmotivated it seemed, and with a suspicious post-USADA decline, Hendricks was very clearly coming to the end of the road. Paulo Costa, on the other hand, was a powerful, battering ram of a human being, capable of bringing high-power punching combos and some vicious kicks to the table. And when this fight finally kicked off, Hendricks immediately looked uncomfortable. Sure, he didn't fall to the ground in the first exchange, but he had neither the power nor the resilience to truly stand up to the rising star. An easy win for this future title challenger. Emelianenko vs. Ryan Bader. Two retirement fights in MMA rarely leave us with anything more than a sour taste in our mouths. For every amazing ending like Robbie Lawler's recent retirement win over Nico Price, you have something akin to Fedor Emelianenko's rematch with Ryan Bader. This fight was not one that we needed to see run back. Fedor had managed to score an excellent late career victory over Timothy Johnson in Russia for a moment that could have been the perfect send-off. But no. Instead of riding off into the sunset with that win in his back pocket, Bellator decided to match him up against a man who had already caught him in the first round. And so when the two met for a second time, the result was pretty similar. Instead of leaving on a high note, the last emperor went out with an underwhelming and sadly disappointing showing. But hey, his legacy remains as good as any heavyweight in the history of the sport. Jon Jones vs. Sonnen. Look, we get it. A season of television featuring Jon Jones and Sonnen makes all the sense in the world. What's disappointing, however, is the fact that Sonnen managed to get a title shot out of it. In truth, Shaw had almost no chance of beating Jon Jones. Hell, we would have been surprised if that fight even lasted longer than a round. To all those people who say you have no chance, this is not worth buying, that this is a gimmick fight, right? To all those people, what do you say to them? What I would say to those people is, listen, tune in. I don't know what's going to happen either. I believe that I could just dominate him and eat him alive. Jones basically made a point of beating Chaul at his own game, opting to fight him up close and personal in the clinch before finishing him with vicious ground and pound. Oddly enough, Chaul was just a few seconds away from being named the light heavyweight champion due to a horrific broken toe sustained by Jones. All he had to do was survive until the end of round 1 and he would have earned a doctor's stoppage TKO. Conor McGregor's Donald Cerone. MMA has a weird relationship with tune-up fights. And don't get us wrong, Conor McGregor absolutely needed a warm-up before getting back into competition when he made the walk to take on the legend Donald Cerone a few years back. In fact, you could argue that a tune-up fight would be perfect for him right now as well. But taking on Cowboy at that point in time, given just how many fights Cerone had lost during that run, yeah, it was a little pointless. Conor McGregor basically ran through Cerone like he wasn't even there, finishing him with his own signature head kick for a 40-second TKO. All Conor was back in the win column, sure, but it didn't feel like anything had been solved. Alexander Volkanovski was Chansung Jeong. Chansung Jeong is a bona fide legend of the lower divisions, a man who deserves all the credit in the world for his grit, his determination, and his longevity in the top flight. But when the Korean Zombie was given a title shot against the informed champion Alexander Volkanovski, it seemed like the UFC were leading him to a brutal defeat. Jeong is a great fighter, yes, but he was clearly not up to the level of the champion, and giving him a title shot off his current run of form was a bit of a stretch. On fight night, Volkanovski turned in a one-sided masterclass, beating the Korean Zombie so badly that he himself had to check in with the veteran to make sure that he actually wanted to continue. Not a great sight, and a matchup that probably shouldn't have been made in the first place.